Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining DiverseWorks in Asia Society, Texas tonight for a live and online diverse discourse with guest curator Adriel Luis, who is the curator for the Digital and Emerging Practices at the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center in Washington, D.C. He's currently streaming live from LA, so I'm excited to have him here. My name is Ashley DeHoyos, and I'm the curator at DiverseWorks, and I'm joined with
Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget Bray. I'm the Nancy C. Allen Curator and Director of Exhibitions at Asia Society, Texas. And we're super excited to be co-hosting tonight's program. And before we go any further, I want to take the time to say a huge thank you to all of the DiverseWorks team for this wonderful program that they're leading, and for Adriel and his contributions and his insights into Houston, as well as the Asia Society team. We'd also like to say a special thank you to the artists who have applied for studio visits and their ongoing flexibility and continued support as we have shifted from the in-person event to an online process. I'd like to say a special thank you to the behind the scenes team who are making tonight possible as well, and that includes Jennifer Gardner, Chris Dunn, and Alana Rubin. Thank you all so much.
So tonight's program is a DiverseWorks program called Diverse Discourse. Diverse Discourse brings national curators, artistic directors, critics, and artist curators to Houston to present free public lectures, conduct studio visits with Houston area artists, performers, and writers. Since July, I've had the pleasure of working with Adriel to reimagine and rethink our diverse discourse process, as well as discuss Houston, the current state of the arts, and the future of our field. I am beyond excited to introduce them to Houston and to think about ways in which we can learn about a city and a community, both online and in person. Adriel was invited almost a year ago to join us as a diverse discourse, and I think it was kind of kismet in order, based on his practice and where we are right now, thinking about digital interaction. Since he has joined on as the diverse discourse guest lecturer, he's been doing research, hosting conversations, meeting artists through virtual studio visits, and learning about the city through online research and kind of inquisitive interviews. So tonight we look forward to the new relationships that will be developed during this time period and this process, and how our conversations and the actions of today's discourse will shift contemporary ideas of future studio visits and creative production. So thank you. Oh, Bridget.
Sure. I just wanted to quickly go over a few virtual housekeeping guidelines, and then we'll introduce Adriel via a brief bio. The talk is being streamed to you through DiverseWorks and Asia Society's YouTube and Facebook channels. It will be recorded, and it will be available to you on demand shortly thereafter. If you're seeking captioning for tonight, please use the Facebook stream for the live stream version. As we go through the presentation, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to share any questions with us that you might have during. And if you're joining us via YouTube live, DiverseWorks and Asia Society staff are going to be monitoring your questions, and will share them with us via the Zoom chat so that we can move the conversation along. And then again, at the end of Adriel's talk, we'll select a few questions from all of those submissions to add to our discussion. But if your question doesn't get answered tonight, never fear. Please feel free to follow up with us after the lecture, and we'll get you the information you're seeking.
So briefly, I'm going to read Adriel's bio, and then we'll have Adriel present his lecture. So Adriel Luis is a community organizer, artist, curator who believes that collective imagination can make a reality where we all thrive. His life work is focused on bridging artistic integrity and social vigilance. He is part of the ILL Literacy Arts Collective, which creates music and media to strengthen Black and Asian American coalitions. Is the creative director of Bombshell Toe, which is works with artists to highlight marginal communities affected by nuclear issues, and collaborates with a dozen of artists and arts organizations through his curatorial and design engine phenomenon. Adriel is the curator of digital and emerging practices at the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, where he advocates for underserved communities to be treated and represented equitably by museums and institutions. He and his team have been curating culture labs and alternative to museum exhibitions built on community-centered beliefs since around 2016. And I'm really excited to have Adriel here. I've been a fan of his work. So without further ado, Adriel Luis.
Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everybody. So good to be here. If you can hear or if you can hear and see me clearly, drop some ones in the chat. I feel like that's like been the time-tested way to show that you're here, right? It's like if you feel me, some ones. All right, so tight. All right, cool. I'm so excited to be here. It's been a trip, just trying to learn about Houston, and so I guess before like stepping into this, I want to just say that coming here based in LA, Venice, California specifically, land that has long been home to Tongfa and Chumash people. I moved here in February, and in understanding what this new home is, have really made an intention to understand it from a timeline that encompasses that deep history. And so in that spirit, in learning about Houston, I also wanted to begin by learning about the deep history of Houston and the continuing indigenous communities and practices that are happening there. So oftentimes when I am researching a place and looking for where that history comes from, I use this app called Native Lands. It's also a website. And Houston is actually one of the places where if you click on it, nothing shows up. There's no names of tribes or nations. But of course, even that means that there's a deep history. And so just in moving forward, even though today I'll be talking a lot about myself and a lot about the things that I've observed and been able to glean from the internet, I also want to say that as I continue to learn Houston, which I'm only really scratching the surface for, I hope to, in that study and in this talk, honor that deep history and all the people who have made Houston what it is today. So yeah, with that said, hi, I'm Adriel, and I am a writer, I'm an artist, I'm a curator. I do what I do in order to be in concert with people in the spirit of creativity. And so everything I do is around that kind of community building. And it's also what I carry in my practice as a curator ever since I got my position at the Smithsonian 7 years ago, and also in the non-Smithsonian work that I do as a curator, my work as a graphic designer, as an organizer, as an artist. And yeah, so I'm excited to come here today and kind of contextualize that with Houston. I wanted to thank Ashley and Bridget, Chris, Alana, Jennifer, for all the practice Zoom calls and everything. Even those have been really great ways to kind of catch the vibe of Houston. So I appreciate you. I appreciate DiverseWorks and Asia Society Texas, and Houstonians. Like looking through the participant list, there's like a lot of familiar names, folks that I just met this past week, some people I'm really excited to meet in the coming days. If you're on if you're on chat, if you don't mind, maybe just like dropping in like what your relationship is to Houston. Like, are you from there? Do you live there now? Have you never been to Houston? Like I have never been to Houston. It would be interesting to kind of just see all, like who's in the room. And then for the folks who are on Facebook and YouTube, I feel like it's like if you're on Facebook and YouTube instead of the Zoom, it's sort of like you're sitting in the balconies, but like, what's up? I see you in the streams. Yeah, so I'm going to be doing this talk sort of broken up because my talk is about 45 minutes long, and I was trying to figure out, it's towards the end of the day. I imagine a bunch of you have been on some Zooms, and so how can I kind of keep it fresh or exciting? So most of this talk isn't going to really require visuals, and so you know, if you've got something to do, like if you want to wash the dishes and just kind of listen to this podcast out, all good. There will be a point where I'm showing some works from artists that I've met and things like that, but I'll give you some proper time. But otherwise, I'll just be reading about 3 to 4 short vignettes that I've been writing in my reflection of Houston. And, you know, it sort of explains itself in the writing, but basically, since I've never been to Houston before, I thought it would be really interesting to just see what I could glean, what information I could get out of Houston from just talking to folks, doing research online, not necessarily with, you know, like actually an expressed intention to like succeed and actually being able to replace a situation of going there, but just to kind of see what would happen. So I'll just dive into it with this first reading. I'm going to share my screen so that if you'd like to read along, you're more than welcome. But otherwise, like I said, you could, you know, for the next few minutes, you just rest your eyes. All right, share, share, share. Just 1 second. See, Alana reminded me to click the share computer sound. Boom. All right. Is this all right? You're just seeing the browser, not seeing any of, not seeing all the repeats of my social security number in the background or anything like that. Cool, cool. All right, all right. So yeah, let's go. You can see my notes and everything. All right. So chapter 1, current state. Every morning I wake up, brush my teeth, and go straight to the beach. Door to shore, the walk is about 6.5 minutes, including the time it takes to dodge the unmasked, take off my flip-flops and trudge through the sand. I know I'm very fortunate. And as to not take this fortune for granted, every time I go to the beach, I go into the water. It doesn't matter if it's cold or if it's gray, even if it's raining. There's something about entering the ocean, the immediate shift in temperature radiating in every cell of my body from toe to head, the sense of being submerged in it, immersed in it, beyond wet or soaked, simply in it. It's life-giving. My favorite moment is when I've gone out just far enough into the water that my toes can't touch the bottom anymore. When it would take more effort to go back to the shore than it would to just stay here. And I just get to float, just be here. For that short moment, there's no political turmoil. There's no raging pandemic, no pressing deadlines, no errands, no push notifications. All the urgent things that will most definitely still exist once I return to land are suspended and replaced by pure presence. A presence justified by the understanding that, at least for this moment, doesn't even matter right now. I just got here. It's this regularity of decontextualizing myself, of leaving here and arriving elsewhere, that is also why I love to travel. I live for that feeling of reset that comes with entering a new place, a sense of hitting the refresh button. Some of my favorite memories involve waiting at an airport curb for a homie to swoop me up. As convenient as Uber is, nothing replaces a familiar face behind the wheel gliding up. I toss my bag in the back seat, hop in shotgun, and as the homie heads towards whatever interstate, they usually pass a J and say something like, well, what do you want to do, Driz? To which I'd reply something like, doesn't even matter right now. I just got here. When DiverseWorks first invited me to come out to Houston, it was the promise of that sensation that I was excited for. Maybe minus the J. To be honest, I just said yes off the strength of wanting to come to Houston. I've never been. It's one of those cities I've always wanted to go to, but never went out of my way for, not because I don't think I'd love it, but because I knew I'd eventually get there, and however I got there would be the perfect way to go for the first time. So when Ashley reached out with the opportunity to come to Houston, spend several days meeting dope artists from all throughout the city and eating amazing food the entire time, it was like, yo, I've been waiting for this. I'm gonna start packing right now. But when I began to investigate even a little into what immediately excited me about coming to Houston, it's so basic, so cliche, borderline caricaturing that it's honestly embarrassing. It's like on the level of someone learning I'm from California and saying, "Cowabunga, dude, how many celebs do you see at In-N-Out, West Side?" But you know, even false notions leave real impressions. So when I think of the things that make me think of Houston, I can't claim that they really hold any truth about what Houston is, but they do hold some truth to who I am. When I recall summer vacation of '96 and how hyped I was on Michael Johnson, who said in an interview for the Olympics that he listens to Beethoven for the 400 meter and Tupac for the 200 meter. I don't know if that says anything about Houston, but it does say something about me. When I reminisce on 2002 and having a real existential crisis about whether or not it was appropriate for me to get a Yao Ming jersey, even though I don't watch basketball, I don't know if it says anything about Houston, but it does say something about me. And when I recall '07 and cruising through downtown Oakland with my Camry speakers on full blast the day International Players Anthem dropped on the blogs, I don't know if that says anything about Houston, but it does say something about me. And it was around 2007 that I really began traveling more extensively, which taught me that just like the culture of a race, the culture of a city can't just be summed up through sports, rap, and food. But even knowing that, these memories are real and they're dear to me, and they wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for Houston, even if that Houston had been distorted and flattened and made unrecognizable by the time they became a part of me. And so I was really excited to finally come out this month to challenge those memories, to complicate them, to build upon them with new ones. But instead, I just been on Zoom a lot. I feel like I'm back in '07, going down Wikipedia rabbit holes and making Chameleonaire playlists and binging King of the Hill and doing other probably not helpful surrogates of actually being there. It's not like DiverseWorks told me I had to center my talk on Houston, but when we decided that a real trip wasn't in the cards, something compelled me to still test the waters, to see how close I could get to a city that, for now, is as distant as the stars. I know it's a fool's errand. I know that no place can be condensed into a list of search results and video chats. But if there's one thing that going to the beach each morning has taught me, is that sometimes you just gotta say fuck it and dive in. So I feel like readings are always awkward on Zoom, right? Because it's just like crickets, but let me know. Yeah, snaps, ones, all that, let me know also, just like in the chat, just be like, slow down if I talk too fast, because sometimes that happens when I get all nervous. But in the spirit of diving in, before I go into my next reading, I wanted to actually share some of the artists I've had a chance to meet. So like Ashley and Bridget were saying, I was supposed to spend 3 or 4 days prior to this talk in Houston, in traffic a lot, and then like getting in the studio visits when we could. And so instead, I've been able to spend an extended period of time, sort of bit by bit, speaking with artists, 1, 2, 3 per day, which has really given me a chance to marinate, I think, on a place in a way that I normally don't really get to when I'm doing work there. And I'll share some more about what I do as a curator, but I wanted to make sure that, get a sense of kind of like where I began with this sort of learning of Houston. So I do have friends from Houston, and so I wanted to share a couple of them because, hey, what's up? What's up, Kerry? So yeah, I wanted to share a couple of the homies that I know from California or New York, but they're originally from Houston, and just to kind of give you a sense of like, what kind of vibes I was getting before I even started any of this research, right? So one of my best friends out here in LA is a comedian named Sheng Wang. And he is just like a food connoisseur. And I imagine he gets that out of Houston, but he just like knows all the spots. And so when we were living in New York together, he was just taking me all throughout Chinatown. Now that we're in LA together, he's taking me to all the spots. And so, you know, I've always looked to him as sort of like one of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to what's delicious. Just play a little bit of him to share him.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shane Wang. My parents are immigrants, and sometimes it's very hard for me to think about it. Like the whole idea of immigration sounds crazy. You know, like, can you imagine leaving home right now? You just leave all your friends, all your family, you move to a completely foreign country just so your offspring can have more opportunities. And then your kid goes into stand-up comedy. You're like, dang, son, that's too much opportunities.
So like all the YouTube comments are just like, he sounds like an R&B radio host, but it's just like, you know, that, you know, so there's a person in my life with, you know, like that talks like Houston, that's just like always a part of my narrative. It's not even like I think about Houston every time I see him, but it's there. And just like my other friend, Patrick, DJ Patrick, who is a DJ from out of Sugar Land. And I met him when he was going to Berkeley and I was going to UC Davis. And yeah, we've been really close ever since then. But he is one of the people that I think of whenever I want to think about music history. You know, like when I was chatting with him the other day and I just asked him about Houston music, it just, you know, like he just gave me, you know, just a deep playlist worth of things to listen to, reminded me of a lot of music that I grew up loving and forgot about. So yeah, when it comes to the food, when it comes to the music, there's been something baked in, even though it wasn't necessarily always centered around this idea of Houston. And then also want to shout out to my friend Tu, who I met when we were both living in DC and now she's back in Houston. She published a magazine on Asian American experience in Houston. I got the print copy right here. And it's been great because like over here, just having something tactile in my hands, you know, to take a break from the screens has been amazing. You know, there's these beautiful images of just like spots that I would imagine, you know, spark some kind of nostalgia in some of the folks here on this call, you know. And so it was just kind of nice to sort of sit and reflect on this sort of unfamiliar sense of familiarity, you know. So yeah. And also Antonius Boy, who also is an incredible artist. I would say the first, you know, contemporary artist that I met who represents Houston, at least in a way that's hard enough for me to be like, ah, they're from Houston, right? And so Antonius is this incredible artist that I think really was a foreshadowing for me of how multidisciplinary and not only creative artists in Houston are when it comes to the subject matter, but also in terms of thinking about where they can go and how much they can expand the practice no matter where they started, you know. So I believe Antonius began one of their earlier mediums was in really intricate paper cuts, like something like this. And over time, Antonius has also become you know, a really dope performance artist, now video artist. Actually, Antonius says hi. So I'm gonna play this because, you know, it'll give you a sense of sort of also more vibes, more references when I just talk to a Houstonian and they start going off about the city.
Good morning, Houston, DiverseWorks, and Adriel. Mwah. My name is Antonius Bowie, and Adriel kindly asked me to share a memory of Houston. And oh, There are just way too many because Houston is unapologetically itself. It's badass, innovative, and it's swampy as hell. And I love it. So, one of my many favorite memories of Houston is being a background dancer for the one, the only drag king, Duke Diesel, aka Tanya Huen, who is a badass motherfucking Vietnamese Slasian American. I miss you, Tanya. I had just recently moved back to Houston for the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft residency program. Shout out to HCCC. And Tanya asked me to join her posse and be a background dance for a cute number at Pearl Bar. So that night we got to be part of Charlie XCX and Dorian Electra's femboy fantasy party. And you know, we fucked the stage up. I'm so proud of Duke Diesel. And just to know the phenomenal queer community of Houston, thank you all for making me who I am today, for always supporting me. And I just want to give a shout out to like Kumquat, DJ Domtop, Junior Fernandez, Emily Ayer, and all the badass artists in Houston. Y'all are really, really, you're doing it. We know we're not New York or LA and Chicago, but you know what? We don't want to be. So continue doing you, be fabulous, whip your hair, and be sure to vote because the world is burning and we need you. And we got this. Mwah, mwah. Love you, Houston. See y'all soon.
Antonius, love Antonius. So yeah, that's kind of the Houston that I sort of like. You know, that was my Houston pregame, and you know, there's still obviously, you know, just a fraction of what this city offers, you know. And one of the things that I've really been enjoying about this time thinking about Houston has been, you know, learning about different neighborhoods, learning about different communities, different ways that people got to Houston, how long intergenerationally people have been in Houston. It's just been like a really beautiful thing. Before I continue, Kerry on YouTube asked which high school Fatty went to in Sugarland. He says Dulles. So more things I have no idea. I'm just transmitting information right now. All right, anyway, so I wanted to just take a little bit of time to share some of the artists that I've met. I've learned that actually as an outsider, when I come into new cities to do work, even though oftentimes I might begin by knowing very little about the city, one of the ways that sort of not knowing has been helpful is that I end up meeting a bunch of artists who don't really even know each other because of they live on different train lines or they live in different neighborhoods, different boroughs. And I imagine it's similar in Houston from what I've heard. And so even for those of you who are from Houston, I'm sure you'll see some familiar names and you might also see some new names. So I just wanted to share this, and also for the folks who are less familiar with the Houston scene. And also to say that this is just the beginning, because there's still also, you know, like I only have talked to half of the artists that I'm going to be talking to during this time. So I'm going to find a way to share the entire posse. But here's who I've gotten to encounter so far. So I had a chance to talk to Mark Fury, Mark Newsom. Mark began as a documentarian and has really done a lot to put the Third Ward on the map. And one of the things I really enjoyed about him is like a really snarky, sarcastic sense of humor. Like he made a Monopoly game installation about the Third Ward, you know, really being able to address heavy topics in a way that's accessible. And I think something that came up over and over again with every single artist that I talked to was this idea of not just communicating your work within a silo of like galleries or even, you know, just one specific, you know, demographic of people. It was really about like, how do I extend, you know, how do I use art as a way to really expand messages, get people more into art, increase art literacy, and also increase the literacy of other other topics. One of the things that I really appreciated about Mark is that he put together this series of video interviews with the elders of the Third Ward, which again, you're hearing tones and accents and pacing that is harder and harder to find, especially in neighborhoods that are gentrifying, like the Third Ward. So I'll just play a couple of seconds of this.
Hello, my name is Safia. This is my sister Nina, and we're from the Extraordinary Elders Film Project. And today we are interviewing Miss Cloud / our neighbor. So, Miss Cloud, tell us about yourself.
I'm an old lady. I am 98 years old, and I live by myself. So I would love for you girls to come over to see me sometime.
How much has Sunnyside changed since you came here?
Oh, it's changed a whole lot. When I came to Sunnyside.
Yeah, so that could go on. We could just, I could watch an Antonius video for this entire talk. I could just watch all these videos this entire talk. But it's a really, really beautiful way to get to know a neighborhood through this love that Mark obviously has for the city, for the area, and for the people of that area. I met Marcos Hernandez Chavez, who does this really beautiful work when it comes to using materials that can express a landscape. So some of these, I think, more recent quarantine drawings are, watercolor sketches, but also Mark is this savant when it comes to installation. And so what I really appreciate about Mark was just the creativity and the different kinds of materials that he would use. And I've spent a lot of time staring at Houston maps, but there was something about this texture and the ways that you could tell that this really rugged material was handled meticulously and with care, I think really said something about Houston. And now he's working on a project with Project Row Houses outside, and talking about Aldine and what he's been doing over there. It's just been like a really, really amazing to see him working from everything like reclaimed and industrial products and materials to now working with flowers and plants. I had a chance to meet Jenna Maravilla, and Jenna I thought was one of the many great representations of somebody who has really taken things seriously when it comes to the trigger of a moment. And so Jenna was working as a nurse until Hurricane Harvey really awakened her to her artistic spirit and to really take that on seriously. But one of the things that she's really retained in this practice is still that sense of care and that sense for the people that she had a sense of during the times that she was working in care centers in Houston. And so again, a writer thinking about something like poetry that can oftentimes come off as very abstract and very insider, and finding ways that it can be accessible to the people that she's around and the people that she understands as the environment around her. She's got a Medium that's awesome. Definitely check it out. I got to meet Kerry Fagan. What's up, Kerry, out in the YouTubes. And I really appreciated Kerry in that I feel like we were very kindred spirits with the way that we observe the world. Kerry's had an opportunity to, multiple opportunities to go to Japan and Florence and really take the spirit that he has honed in Houston and take it to places all throughout the world, and then taking the sensibilities that he's picked up from there and bringing it back to Houston. Lately, he has been putting together these videos of performances. I guess lately he has become known for this practice of chair stacking, which I think can be, is a very interesting direction for him to go to, considering the fact that he really began by doing photography and documenting things. But again, this idea of taking something that can often be considered very highbrow, like art, and making it something that everybody can relate to. You know, we've all stacked chairs, you know, especially those of us who like organize events or are waiting for our friend who organized an event. We've all stacked them, and he made an art form out of it. And I think constantly in Houston, I was seeing artists who were taking things that so many of us might take for granted and really bringing life, creative life into those actions. And I got a chance to meet Matt Manalo, who immigrated here early in his life from Manila, but since then has been finding different ways to bridge his identity as Filipino and also as a Houstonian. And what I really appreciate about him, similar with Marcos, is this ability to bring life to these very raw industrial materials. And so these things that I feel like oftentimes, you know, we look at something like this, and because it's framed inside of a gallery, we recognize it as art. But I think, you know, this is the kind of, I think, messy, you know, rugged, natural texture of the world that oftentimes we just sort of let pass by. It's definitely something that I've been missing, especially while I've been home all day. Sometimes I'm like, I just want to see a pile of rocks that's different from the pile of rocks I see every day, you know. And what Matt has really done is composed those rocks, composed that wood, composed this material in a way that really shows that so much of this can be seen with intention and care. And he's really taken that as well in this practice of creating the A-Leaf Art House. Again, you know, setting up something that's accessible to the neighborhood in a way that is conscious about how art can oftentimes contribute to gentrification, and really thinking about what he can do to create a space that nourishes the creative space in A-Leaf, as opposed to kind of like, you know, setting the table for new residents and new cultures, you know. So I think that it's really beautiful to see how all of these artists have found ways to represent Houston that can seem very distinct, but at the same time, you know, is really underlined by this idea of wider accessibility. And I think one of the things that I also found was really beautiful in this balance was this fact that even though a lot of the work, just like Matt's or like Mark's, is very much about, you know, retaining the city, preserving the neighborhood, but at the same time, very, very welcome, you know, very incredible hosts, very generous when it comes to letting people in who are from outside. And I find that that's oftentimes something that's very rare to find, you know, like oftentimes for those of us who are very proud of where we came from, we become very hardened every time we see a new face, you know. And so striking that balance of, you know, like, how do I make sure that my home stays home while at the same time, you know, like recognizing that immigrants come in, you know, like people move in, you know, like folks escape other storms and need to come in, and how do we widen this without extracting from the things that make our neighborhoods really rich. So yeah, that's the artist so far, and like I said, there's like hella other artists I'm about to meet. Really, really excited about that. Drop some ones if you're ready for the next reading. Cool. All right, if not, I was like, I'll just play this Antonius video again. All right. Chapter 2, Tumbleweed. Whoever said that being well-traveled isn't a personality type didn't travel well. I've learned so much about who I am by being in places I'd never been, by the thoughts that stew in my head 5 hours into a sleepless, jet-lagged night, by the things I'm willing to have for dinner after landing at 2 a.m. and the only restaurant still open is the gas station, by what I'm willing to lie down on during long layovers in crowded terminals. I've felt a joy only known when realizing right before takeoff I'm about to have the whole road to myself, and the searing rage only felt when someone scoots into the aisle seat right as we reach cruising altitude. I love travel because it makes me ask the basic questions, both about places and about myself. Does it usually look like this in September? What do I want to see today? Is it okay to drink the tap? Why does my neck hurt? I've known home in foreign places. I've known feeling lost when returning from them. Some people travel to take a break from daily life, to leave it all behind, like they're method acting towards a wilder or more laid back or more adventurous or more professional character. But not me. I travel in new places, open, malleable, ready to be affected for good. I like to move through the world like tumbleweed. I love picking up where I left off and keeping it moving. I know I've traveled a place well when it leaves a lasting impression on me, when the person unpacking my bags feels more enriched, more knowing, having lived more life than the person who packed them. I collect these idiosyncrasies like souvenirs. I make these traits a permanent part of me like stamps on a passport. Sometimes it's just learning how to say shit right, like New Orleans or Hawaii or Houston. One way to know that someone's definitely not a New Yorker is how they pronounce the street where Soho starts. "This is what's wrong with America," my uncle said during one of my first trips there. "Who gets to decide that this street is called Houston and that city is Houston? And then we come to this country and we're supposed to just know?" I went back to New York countless times before I ended up moving there. By then, I'd learned how to say Houston and even corrected a few people who said it wrong. I learned to call the subway and not the train, and definitely not the metro. I learned to swipe my card at just the right angle and speed as to not get stuck and make everyone roll their eyes at me and suck their teeth. And if it didn't work, I learned to not ask the person playing Farmville on their phone behind the booth. "Your card doesn't work, that's why it's not letting you through." I learned not to get butthurt every time a New Yorker yelled at me with obvious but unhelpful advice, which is like always. Another thing I learned about New York that changed me is how I walk. I wonder, if I'd never been in New York, at what pace would I walk at now? I know the answer is basically a slower one, a much slower one, a block a minute, a block a minute. I remember repeating to myself one afternoon while racing down Broadway to catch a meeting I'd already been late for. I remember when walking that fast started to feel natural. When I began effortlessly gliding past waddling tourists, seamlessly dodging the two dudes who always seem to be carrying a big ass rug when you're running late in Manhattan. Learning the New York walk felt like joining a flock, being part of a pattern and flow of a place, and it felt good to belong. That's the same way I felt the summer I spent in Shanghai, when I'd straddle my homie's bicycle at the traffic light, flanked by a dozen other cyclists, all staring down the smoggy sunset. Out there, even bike lanes have bike lanes, so the motorists don't mow down the peddlers. I was a proud peddler, and I reveled in being able to get anywhere with hardly a noise, coasting through courtyards, cutting into alleyways, weaving through populated marketplaces. The week I got home to Brooklyn, I bought the cheapest bike I could find on Craigslist and immediately bit the curb on a pothole. But it didn't matter though. I'd never not had a bike since then. One of the main reasons I moved to LA was to be closer to the people I grew up with, but by the time I got there, I had just missed one of my best friends, Dalek. It's Dalek's birthday today. Happy birthday, Dalek. I just don't like how LA makes me see other people, he would say. What he described sounded like a sickness, a possession that, despite his efforts and intentions, slowly overtook his system. He was referring to the Hollywood auditions, the schmoozing, the trying to be seen, the always wondering if everybody was making friends or just trying to be near potential fame. But since I got here right before a pandemic, I haven't seen enough people to be exposed to the ailment that Dalek speaks of. I can say for sure that I've changed in profound ways since I began sheltering in place in March. But like everyone else, it hasn't been by being anywhere but here. The headlines, videos, songs, memes, and endless Zoom calls all come from somewhere real, but by the time they get to me, they've been pixelated and condensed and curated into the same handful of feeds on the same screen in my hands. What do I mean when I say I'm here for you to someone somewhere I'm not? What does it even mean to be anywhere during a time when virtually everything has gone virtual? Will we be able to sum up how we've grown this year through our browser cache and YouTube history? In this past week, I've met more Houstonians than the number of people I've talked to in person the whole 8 months I've been in LA. What's the more precise way to learn a city? The place without the people, or the people without the place? Maybe, for just this moment, here is just this moment. Draw some ones, draw some ones. Cool. Thank you, y'all. I've got 2 more pieces. Like I said, I'm going to read one more that that will be before the Q&A, and then I want to make sure that there's enough time for Q&A, and then the last one's a bit shorter, and we'll get it in if we're not like going over time. But before I do that, I did, I was asked to talk about what I do, so I should make sure I do that as well. I've been feeling very allergic to like kind of academic presentations, which is why I sort of, I've been journaling a lot more though, which is one of the things I've picked up again after a long time. I think I spent so many years just going to bed every night feeling guilty for not writing that day. So I've appreciated that about this moment. So I wanted to kind of, go with that flow with this presentation. But as a curator, so much of what I do is about getting to know a place, and I don't think I really understood that when I began my job. This was my first full-time job ever. Before that, I was touring as a musician, doing freelance graphic design and web design, just kind of doing gigs, and but I was spending a lot of time on the internet, and so I got this role as curator of digital. But as soon as I like got into my office, my first cubicle, and sat in front of a computer, and I was like, this isn't it. And so what I really began doing then was I was like, well, I just moved to DC. Let me just get to know this place. And I learned that there was a huge divide between the museums, which all tend to be national based, and the artists, which so many of them give a vivid memory, a vivid understanding of DC, the way that Houston artists can give of Houston. And so the first really like in-person projects I started working on, I realized that's how I can bring in my background as a community organizer. I could also, because I've been an artist before, I'm still an artist. There's a lot of things I realized that I understood about like what artist response times, or like like things that folks need that maybe other types of contractors don't need. And I found that also that was what I really missed, was just being around artists, which is what I got to do all the time when I was doing full-time art. And I got to travel a lot. So I'm just going to share really quickly 3 projects recently that I've worked on in different places and how they've affected me, just to give you a sense of really sort of like how I like to try to hone a relationship with a place. So outside of my Smithsonian work, one of the main projects I've been working on lately with my partner, lovely Umayam, is a project called Ways of Knowing. And so my partner is a nuclear policy analyst, but in being together, one of the things that really happened was us, kind of, like our creativity and the way we think getting into each other's water. And so she started thinking really deeply about also like local communities that have been affected by the nuclear industrial complex, but people often don't think about, because when people think about nuclear, they're just thinking about the end of the explosion, not the beginning of the making of the bomb. And when you think about the beginning of the making of the bomb, you're talking about indigenous communities that have been affected deeply by uranium extraction. You're talking about Black folks in the South and in the Midwest who were used for cheap labor. You're talking about the Congo, which was extracted for the nuclear, where uranium was extracted for the nuclear bomb that ended up destroying Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's like, it is a story about Black, indigenous, and people of color. And so this project here called Ways of Knowing is really an investigation into the history of uranium mining in Navajo land. And even though I grew up in California, I kind of slept on the entire South. You know, I think Californians, we just sort of, we do that, you know, like this is what happens when you live in a big state. You know what it's like, Houston. So you know, started traveling and spending a bunch of time in New Mexico and Arizona, and we were filming an immersive film, a 360 film. And so we just got to spend time in these really beautiful naturist places, and at the same time spending time with our friend Sunny Dooley, who's a Navajo storyteller, a lot of activists from Hopi and Navajo communities. And that really shifted me. Like, I realized that when I identify with something like Asian American, I think a lot about the Asian side, but then when it came to the American side, I was still thinking about it from a very limited framework. And so ever since beginning working on this project, one of the ways that I've really been fulfilled is realizing that I can shift my entire identity and thinking around what it means to be American. And that's enriched my life so much because you know, it's deepened my relationship with the natural environment around me. It makes me think more deeply about what I'm doing while working at a major government institution, you know, and I really appreciate that. I can't imagine how I would have you know, gotten to the place that I am creatively, personally, with my relationships if it wasn't for this time in the Southwest. Another project that I was working on, the last big project on site, on location that I was working on before the pandemic, was a culture lab called Finga. And so the culture labs are sort of like the flagship project that I work on. I've done 4 of them so far, and the first one was in DC. And like I mentioned, because there's always been this divide between the museums and the local artists, it was my goal to just like throw a really pop-in art festival at the Smithsonian, in the Smithsonian building, but with like, you know, DC artists that had just been like needing to get their due. And we did that, and it was incredible. We did it at the Arts and Industries building, which is next to the Smithsonian Castle. It's like the oldest building at the Smithsonian. And then shortly after that, we did another one in New York. And that was also great because I had spent a few years living in New York. And so I got to reconnect with that community, got to expand my understanding of New York. We did one in Honolulu, which is home to 2 of our other curators. So, you know, a lot of good reasons why it was great going to Hawaii a bunch of times, but Hawaii really affected me in terms of really beginning that thinking around my relationship with other species, and not just my activism and organizing being around a human to human aspect, but really thinking about the deeper environment around us. And then Tafanga took place in Aotearoa, Auckland, New Zealand. And so there was just so much about decentering my identity as an American, which I think at the time I really needed, you know, like right now, especially with this administration, you know, like things happening, you get really, really up in your feelings as an American and kind of feel like, you know, like it's kind of all about you when it's really not. And so going to Aotearoa, learning about how a society operates that is really striving to incorporate in a really intimate and real way Indigenous practices and knowledge, but at the same time, welcoming immigrants from all throughout the world and making it a place where folks can like really come together. We thought it would be a great idea to theme the Culture Lab on civility and what it means to be civil, right? This is a place that was colonized and was commemorating the anniversary of Captain Cook's arrival in order to civilize the natives there. And so this notion of civility spanning all the way from, you know, pre-Cook era when it was different Māori people sorting out ways to live amongst each other to now, and how we exist together both in person and online. And so getting to spend time in Aotearoa was really amazing in terms of helping me think about how everything that I've learned in my ethnic studies classes, my activism history can really reach a global level and really land. And so yeah, I really appreciate all these artists, spending time with them. I miss them so much. Each of the culture labs will work with about 30 to 50 artists. which is a lot, but it's super fun. And then lastly, to kind of start bringing it around closer to Houston, in 2019, I also got to work on a project called Elevator Pitch with an artist named Christine Sun Kim, who is currently based in Berlin, but is Korean American from California, and New Orleans Airlift, which is a New Orleans based collective. And I'll just play this video and then kind of talk a bit about that for now. And also just, I'm gonna play this video, a couple minutes, I'll do my last talk or I'll do my little reading and then we'll do a Q&A if that's okay. But organizers text me if I'm running too much over. Oops, hold up. Okay, I'm gonna try it again. And then if it doesn't work for whatever reason, I'll play it without the full screen situation and keep it moving. All right. Yeah, all right.
I approach sound as an idea. It's conceptual, how people respond to it.
Thinking about sound as not just something that enters you through the ears, but also through other parts of your body and how it's a really felt experience.
The basic premise was to build an elevator. And we found out that elevators are a huge part of the deaf experience. They're a place for play instead of awkwardness, like they are with the hearing community.
So a deaf group, we tend to yell in the elevator all the way up or all the way down. Now the reason for that is that when there's enclosed or contained spaces, you can feel your own voice, like the echo.
Christine brought to us this idea of recording deaf voices in Louisiana as the floors, as a portion of the buttons you would press.
That bolt right there is a big magnet, like transducer behind there, effectively turning this whole piece of sheet metal into a speaker. You can see it vibrate slightly when it plays.
We worked with people who were profoundly deaf. We worked with people who were hard of hearing. We worked with people who have cochlear implants. And we got a huge variety of sounds from them.
When you sit down to a piano, you know what other people have done with the piano and you try to do what they've done or you react against what they've done. When you create this musical instrument that it has no history really, it really allows someone to come to it and discover their own sound in it.
My hope is that even if deaf folks come out here to experience elevator pitch, they also find relationships with the other structures that exist around here. And I also hope that hearing people who come to the Music Box learn more about how sound is experienced aside from hearing.
So I really wanted to honor the deaf voice, and it's more about providing them a platform. It just happens to be in Music Box Village.
Cool. So yeah, one of the things that I really strive to do when I travel to a place and start engaging in the practice of working with local communities, one, recognizing as an outsider is I think about, how do I connect personally? I feel it's really important to introduce myself and whatever I'm asking from local communities to share with me, I should be able to share back. It's one of the things I've learned oftentimes is where people from institutions, including curators, rub folks the wrong way is like, it feels like an interrogation instead of an exchange. And so, and I love doing that. And so, so once I get a sense, so for example, with New Orleans, if you've ever been there, you know that it's a place that you can't just read about, as a musician, as someone who's always loved music, my entire understanding of sound just change the first time I went to New Orleans. I recognized that it was something that is not just something you hear, you know, like it's in it. It's just in life, right? And so at that point, I had worked with Christine Sun Kim before on another project in my New York Culture Lab, Control Alt, and she had really deepened my understanding of sound as well. I started learning American Sign Language, started thinking about what accessibility means in everything that I do. And so I wanted to bring her to New Orleans. She had never been. And so kind of like in the same way that I think probably, you know, like the folks at DiverseWorks and Asia Society, you know, how they're excited to bring people in and show them the city. That's, you know, like as little as I knew about New Orleans, I had met enough people that I knew would really take her in and collaborate in a beautiful way. And they did. And so what I had attempted to do with that was not just take from New Orleans by being like, oh, wow, this place changed me. Great, you know, but also from there, from an understanding, recognize what I might be able to offer. And so I knew that there were a lot of people there who, as musicians, love music and love sound so much, but at the same time, the idea of doing something with the deaf people of New Orleans, I think, is something that sort of seemed elusive and couldn't quite wrap their head around. And so bringing these artists together, working together and presenting this work was sort of the offering that I was hoping to do, where it feels like, you know, in the same way, now that I've learned all of this from New Orleans, how can I, you know, sort of like reciprocate that with my interpretation in collaboration with artists, with community. And that's really sort of the spirit that I go about all of my local, you know, local all over the place kind of thing, you know. It's been really interesting, you know, like these days in museums, people like to just toss around the term local communities, and they just basically kind of, I don't know what they mean by it. Usually they just mean non-museum people. But when you say like local people everywhere, it kind of is like, okay. And so I've really been thinking deeply lately about how many more cities can I do this kind of work? You know, I was so tired from traveling at the end of last year, but I keep on encountering places that are just so magical and beautiful. And so that's something I've been really deeply thinking about. Anyway, I'm going to do one more reading, and then I know I'm going a little bit over. We'll do the Q&A after that, and then if we have time, we'll do that last one. Y'all still with me? Cool. Chapter 3, Out of the Loop. I'm from the California Bay Area, but before it got swallowed up by Silicon Valley. Before tech bros, before Google buses, before people casually paired terms like Fruitvale and cute in the same sentence. The Bay I knew kept an arm's length from all that computer stuff. The Bay as I know it is constituted by wherever BART goes. BART being the sprawling transit system where most cities are represented by one station, and each station has like 3 parking lots, because in the Bay, even public transportation is something that you need a car for. The BART map includes the South Bay, the actual Silicon Valley, only to tease it with a gray dotted line, a route committed to commuter fantasies. The mythical San Jose BART stop is like the train actually going to happen. So slight correction, I did some research earlier today. In June 2020, BART extended southward to Milpitas and Berryessa, which is like expecting detox and instead getting Compton. It's like almost, but not quite. Anyway, I've lived throughout the Bay, but the part I identify with the most is West Oakland, where I spent my formidable years squatting in a loft across the street from an actual crack house, a crack house made semi-famous when it appeared in the background of Zion I and the Grouch's 2006 album, Heroes in the City of Dope. Right around the time I left the Bay, some newcomers had just painted a mural of a geisha in an effort to beautify the fence next to the crack house. That was back in the late 2000s, which still feels weird to say, before MySpace died, before the new Bay Bridge, which replaced my Bay Bridge, which was perpetually under repair ever since the '89 earthquake snapped it like a glow stick. This is the Bay I know, the Bay I miss when I'm back for the holidays and someone asks me if I'll ever return before letting me know that I'm always welcome to crash at their cute little apartment in Fruitvale. It wouldn't even be the same Bay, is usually how I reply. At best, it would be like coming home after a long trip to all your shit replaced, walls gutted for the exposed brick, sister's room converted into an Airbnb, and mom's cooking substituted by a DoorDash coupon code. The Bay I claim is buried at least 2 layers deep in the cultural archaeology, underneath the hyphy movement, right around where jeans are tucked into socks and socks are tucked in shoes, where Wild 107 still plays Filipino R&B, where people refer to each other as mine, and R's are hella emphasized with that extra crisp. It's a Bay that even when we can all travel again, I'll never be able to take you to. It was another time. It was another place. So this is home back in 2007. To recall a place by referring to before something happened, it's kind of a flex though, huh? It's a way to low-key ask for brownie points from the locals, or at least a half smile and a recognizing nod. Like, I used to live in Brooklyn, but before the Jay-Z Stadium and Atlantic Terminal. Or, I was living on U Street in DC, but before they closed down Bohemian Caverns and built the Trader Joe's. Or, I'm in LA now, but I got here before the whole pandemic thing hit. I know that last one's different, mostly because it's so recent, but just watch. One day, this too will be a badge of honor, a way to disassociate myself from the noobs. When everyone here recalls the boarded storefronts down Venice Boulevard, the looming billboards of Jacob the accident lawyer with a face mask photoshopped onto his face, and how, for a few months, the 10 could feel like it was your private highway. I was there for that too, someone will say, even though each of our memories were had alone. But then again, that's how a lot of memories are made in the city. I can't say I know what version of Houston I'm getting through the internet. Search results aren't organized by cultural moments, and YouTube wormholes aren't mapped by neighborhoods. I've revisited Lil Troy songs I haven't heard since middle school. I've leapt through street views of neighborhoods referred to in essays by Gia Tolentino and Brian Washington. I've gone through so many accounts of storms and hurricanes that I'll never hear the names Alicia and Allison the same again. I've been joking to people that if Houston was a person, they'd probably want to put a restraining order on me the way I've been stalking it on the internet. But I don't know if any of this is really bringing me any closer to the city or giving me a sense of belonging, or if it would earn me any brownie points, or why I feel the need to earn them in the first place. I've never been there. I know that people who know will still call the 69 the 59, but I don't know if that's for me to know. I've sat in traffic before, but I've never sat in Houston's traffic. I've never tried to pull a last-minute exit from one of Houston's HOV lanes. I've never looked up at the stack of overpasses from a gridlocked car in Houston. I've felt hot, but I've never felt Houston hot. My skin hasn't expanded in Houston's sweltering humidity, hasn't browned in Houston's sun. I know good food, at least I think I do, except whenever I talk to a Houstonian, and then I question if I actually ever have had good food ever, as long as I haven't actually eaten in Houston. I could spend forever downloading and viewing and zooming, and there would still be things I'll never know the way I'd know by being there just for a day. This is knowledge not instilled, but accumulated. Memories not remembered, but transplanted. The other day, I spent an hour looking through videos of Katie Mall's old carpet. My friend too said it means something to her, that there's something about that kind of ugly that's beautiful, and that this says something about Houston. I think I get that, or at least a Bay version of it, because it must be the reason why my heart sinks every time I drive through 33rd and Hollis and find the loft I squatted in replaced by shiny luxury condos, and the crack house demolished but not gone, only replaced by its own debris and shattered pipes, like as if Oakland just smeared it out with its thumb. That geisha's still there though. It managed to stick around and see through all the change in ways I couldn't bear to, beautifying the fuck out of the neighborhood since before I stopped calling it home. All right, I think I should do that. How are y'all doing? How are y'all doing? Thank you. Cool. I think I screen shared wrong earlier after the elevator pitch thing, so I couldn't see the chats. So I hope you could hear me the entire time because I couldn't tell. All right, I know I'm running over. You know, let's figure out what we want to do. Yeah.
I'd love to see if there are any questions in the chat, but while we're getting started, I just want to say thank you so much for this beautiful presentation. I feel like, in a way that your presentation made me feel like because of the chat and just people and the energy that you've given, that like I was actually in community with people, and I thought that was really beautiful to experience over the internet, even though we're digital. I'm wondering, you know, you talked a little bit about this. Can you, when we sat down to talk about you coming to Houston, I mean, I think that, it was really interesting because usually with the Diverse Discourse, we're bringing in guests, for a couple of days, and it's really rapid fire. And you suggested to try this as an experiment, and I was like, all right, let's go for it. How do you feel now that you've kind of gone through some of the studio visits and, this process, like from when we first began?
I feel so good. I mean, I was saying yesterday to Lovely that, like, I mean, I've really missed traveling. Obviously, I spent the entire time writing about it. But what I've really missed, I really actually don't miss the traveling. Like my back and neck feel better than they've ever felt. So on that tip, I'm happy to not be on planes and stuff. But I really do miss being welcomed in, I think. And I don't know if that sounds like selfish or self-centered, but like, to me, those moments really, really are a sense, like they really give me this sense of humanity that continues to persist despite everything. And I felt that way with this, because it was like, I mean, I don't know how many Zooms these artists have to be on, and then they're like coming on another one at night, and just to talk to a stranger. I really appreciated that. And, one of the things talking to Jenna, like I like scarfed down a taco before talking to her, because also like before you meet someone on Zoom, you don't know what's professional. And so, we agreed that next time, we can bring tacos to the Zoom. But that sense of just kind of being at home, being invited into people's homes. A number of people were saying, oh, well, like it's better this way because if we were doing studio visits, I don't have a studio. And it's like, most artists I visit don't have, like straight up studios that aren't like their living room or their bedroom or their closet, and so one of the things I really love, especially working with artists who are emerging and mid-career and community-centered, is the fact that oftentimes this work means breaking bread with people in their living rooms and under their roofs. I love it, and I felt that way. I felt like there was this real collaboration in the conversation for creating the space of home. And I think for those of us who have been on Zooms, it's just like, you never know what a Zoom's going to be like, right? And so I really dug the vibe. It really gave me a really beautiful sense of that kind of hospitality that Houston, that I'd heard about. So.
Bridget, did you have a question that you want to ask? And then we have a couple of questions on chat too, and Q&A.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious about this idea. It came up in the conversations before, but you really just brought in so much detail tonight about the idea of collective versus personal nostalgia. And I think that's such an important part also of kind of what we're experiencing right now in the United States. Can you share a little bit more about that? I don't know if the conversations with the artists have shed light on that, or I just think that that concept and the tension in that is a really generative space.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, one of the things that I've been, you know, I mean, this whole pandemic, you know, obviously because of the, you know, like the decrease in socializing, it really has been an opportunity to kind of like look inward and kind of like interrogate questions that I think typically would just sort of whiz by because I've got so many other things on my list to do. And I'm not going to say the phrase because I know it's triggering, but like, you know, like the campaign phrase of the, you know, of the president, you know, like there's a lot of the, you know, there's a nostalgia baked into it. And I think that, you know, so many of us, I don't know if we would necessarily use the words of like trying to make something or calling, you know, like calling that, you know, that adjective, but all of us have something like, you know, like people, every time I mention the Katy, I got to go to the Katy Mall, I guess. It's not going to be like, I got to go in a time machine and then go to Katy Mall before I got constructed, because people just, they just are like, oh, the Katy Mall cart, you know, and so it's just.
The carpet and the food court. Yeah. Time machine for you, for sure.
I think that, especially in times of uncertainty, we want to, you know, like we want to be able to find comfort in things that either stay the same or that even revert back. You know, I think it's also one of the reasons why there's so many reboots of shows, you know, like, or like, you know, all of a sudden the show that had been canceled for like 20 years got a new season. I think people just want to take a moment and just kind of like relive that. You know, I think that, you know, one of the things that strategy, that campaign strategy was really effective with is that it really tugs at that heart, but in a way that's so broad, you know, that, you know, it's not really specific. And so it can mean kind of something to anybody, you know? And so I've been, you know, for me, for example, I've been thinking a lot about, you know, like I made a playlist to like revisit a lot of the music I listened to growing up in Houston. And, you know, and what I talked about in my first piece is like, those are very Bay experiences for me, you know, like in the school bus and like you know, like in the school bus in high school and they're playing Destiny's Child, you know, like that's my Bay Area experience, right? But I think at the same time, because growing up with hip hop, which is a very place-based, represent your town medium, you know, like I was very aware of that Houston, you know, and so, but even still, you know, there's plenty of people I talk to because of age or because of different tastes, you know, like, you know, I could bring up Paul Wall and then they may or may not respond to that, you know, so yeah. But I feel like it's going to be funny when like in like years down the road, you know, especially like a generation or two down the road, when whatever the social media platform, if they're whatever, you know, in the sky, what they're projecting the feeds, you know, like, and then they show like a meme, like a screenshot of like Zoom, except with like people who aren't alive right now, you know, like, it'll be like, oh, ha, ha, look at that, I remember Zoom, you know. And so that's going to be that's a nostalgia that's inevitable, that all of us, you know, are experiencing, you know, that we're all creating right now.
There's a question in the chat that's, and it's also in the Q&A. It says, how different do you think this experience would have been if you did not know a single person in Houston and you didn't have rice paper?
Yeah, because those were definitely like my primary sources. I mean, that's actually a good question. I mean, there's plenty of places that I've traveled to where I didn't know anybody beforehand, and it's kind of the thing, you know, like for example, New Orleans. Like the first time I went to New Orleans, I didn't know anybody. I mean, I actually went for a wedding, so it wasn't, you know, it was kind of like a really basic kind of cliche way of going to New Orleans, and the people that I knew there had only been living there for like a couple of years, and so I don't know if, you know, and on top of that, I hadn't really talked to them ever since they had moved to New Orleans. I had known them from before that, and so in a lot of ways that was very new, and I think that that was exhilarating, because I would say that comparably Houston and New Orleans, because of growing up in hip hop, like there's been some sort of narrative in my head about what it is. But I don't know, like there are also places where I've been multiple times, and from one reason or another, like I haven't really connected with anybody. Like one of the places is Hong Kong, where my family is from. And it's not like I haven't had like really great conversations with people, but I think that there is something about, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself when I go to like the motherland, and then I end up like, I don't know, it's really hard to approach a place like Hong Kong the way I would approach like a new city, where I don't really have those kinds of, like kind of deep connections to. I feel like I can kind of just like go in and be a fly on the wall, where when I when I feel like when I go to Hong Kong, I feel like I've got to like, I don't know, find a plot of land and like dig up my birthright or something. And so yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways I couldn't have done this kind of research with many other, like there's not really another city I can think of. One, because when I was touring with my band, I traveled a lot all throughout the country, but we just didn't really get booked that much in the South, in that part of the South. We went to like Alabama a bunch, we went to like Florida and Georgia, but not really Texas and the Midwest. And so that's still been very new to me. It's sort of like, like one of the main kind of like uncharted parts of the US that I would say that this region has really been a big part of my life in the last couple of years. And I feel like I'm at the age to embrace it in a way where maybe I couldn't have had I not like traveled kind of like in a bunch of other places.
So there's another question here that says, Adriel, you seem to adapt to different environments with ease and even approach that adaptability with as if you were trying to find a place where you can claim a sense of nostalgia, if you could say that. Is home where you are? Do you have something that makes you say, yes, that is home? It's also in the Q&A if you want to read it.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Especially because of like what this last year has been. So I was living in DC from 2013 to 2019, and until May 2019. And then between May and this February, because both Lovely and I both had work in different parts of the world, like we both had a bunch of traveling happening. And it just so happened that like whenever I had a trip, she didn't, and whenever she had a trip, I didn't. And so we were like, okay, well, let's just move out and just like, just float for a while. And so I was like traveling with her to places, and then she was traveling with me to places. But during that like 7 months that I literally didn't have a place that I could, like a physical place that I could call home, I had to figure out, how do I feel a sense of home? I wouldn't say I necessarily get homesick. I definitely miss people at home, but I don't, like, I think at a certain point in that 7 months traveling, I was kind of like, oh, I just want to sleep in my bed. But like, for the most part, I'm the thrill of being in new places, and I think also the comfort of being invited in really does, I think, counter what I would typically miss about the familiarity of home. But the ways that I found home, to answer the question, is, I had never really been big on routines, but I formed like a really strong morning routine of like, I do my meditation, I do my stretches. I feel bad about not writing, and then I carry on, right? And so trying to begin and end my, and having like, familiar objects, like, I thought was helpful. Just like certain things that I could kind of like, like sit by my bed, wherever my bed was, to just kind of be like, okay, well, like you're not in the middle of a dream right now, kind of a thing. But I think also because a lot of the traveling that I was doing was to places that I had already been to, like, for example, working on this project in Auckland. I had been to Auckland a few times. And so, after the first time I go to a city, especially a trip like what would have been with Houston, it just, like after that, I'm just kind of like, God, now I gotta figure out a way to come back here like every month, right? And so, I think seeing familiar faces was always really helpful. I went to Manila a bunch of times because that's where Lovely's work was, and she's got family there, so there was that sense of familiarity. And then kind of in a weird way, like feeling a sense of familiarity with just like checking into airports and stuff. At that point though, I felt like I was like, you got to find a new path, because yeah, it felt like I was in that George Clooney movie.
We have a question. I'm so glad Jenna's asking this because, I really like the title that you chose for the lecture, The Concept of Memory Transplant. And she's asking, what ideas have bubbled up from this memory transplant? What themes or mediums of collaboration are brewing?
That's a really good question. I mean, the level of it's even weird calling it research. Part of it is because it's been so intimate, and part of it is because I feel like working in an institution, like makes me feel guilty for calling, like watching a bunch of YouTube videos research. But like one of the things I always, like for example, with New Orleans, or like with the Auckland project, even though I know I'm going to find a way to get back to New Orleans and just see my people again. I'm going to find a way to get back to Auckland to see my people again one day. But there is a closing of a chapter when sort of like the event's going to launch. And I know that at least for a while, I'm probably shift my focus elsewhere for a while. And I'm always on the plane to that place feeling bad about all the things that I didn't do, like in terms of learning the place, like I wish I really, like immerse myself in the musical playlist and really, like research that further. I wish I, I wish I went to this neighborhood that I didn't go to, but that I heard a bunch about. I wish I, like understood, like the history more of these cities and things like that. I don't tend to ever really like to kind of like research places from like a touristy standpoint, but sometimes when it's sort of like I'm going somewhere and I've had a bunch of other projects and haven't had a chance, I do just end up just like looking at really basic reference points instead of being able to do this kind of a deep dive. So yeah, I don't know, like one of the things I've been talking to a lot of people about is like what is the pace of life supposed to be like, like if because this is an opportunity to change the pace, and I've been trying to figure that out too, questioning why productivity is always such a unquestionably positive term in conversation. This kind of knowing of a place before I actually go there, I think I'm not really gonna be able to reap the rewards of it fully until I actually get to Houston, because then that's gonna be when I actually, now I've written this body of work, I've had these conversations, I have all of this, I have all of this evidence that of knowing a place, trying to know a place in ways that I don't think I've really given myself the opportunity and the time, the energy, the capacity to approach really any of the places aside from the places where I've lived before in that kind of a way. So I don't know. I mean, like ideally right now in this moment, I'm thinking that I just want to travel less, but more fully, like really, really focus on presence when I'm in places. I'm also continuing to interrogate in this practice that I'm where, like, because there aren't really a lot of, there are a good number, but there's not a whole lot of curators who are thinking about community practice in this kind of a way. The field is so small, it can become very easy to become the kind of person where different cities are sending invitations for me to go and engage with their local community and do what I did with New Orleans, do what I, and And I love it. I love traveling, but I think at a certain point I could, fall into that trap of it just sort of being like I'm just collecting stamps on my passport as opposed to like really, really engaging fully, And so I know I'm near the limit in terms of, like how many cities I can fit in my heart.
Well, and I'm really glad to hear you say, because this is something I struggle with all the time. As soon as you leave a city, it's like, how can I get back here? But then you think, oh, this whole other list of cities I haven't been to yet, right? It's that balancing act between the two. But if anything, this recent experience maybe is making us all want to have a deeper connection, kind of go into those extra layers.
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely agree in terms of too just sustainability of relationships. And I think we talked about that in the really early conversations, and just about like the pace that we're moving and how we're engaging as curators, like sustainability, like how do we keep up with those relationships when we're moving on to a project really quickly. So there's two questions left, one of which I think you might have answered, but Kerry in the YouTube from YouTube is wanting to know what is the first thing that you want to do when you get to Houston? And then the other question is from the Q&A, and it says when and where is the next city, or are you jet lagged and internet lagged? So I think both of those go together.
Yeah. I already said what I want to do. The first thing I do when I get to nothing. I think first thing I want to do. All right, so like let's say it's like all good to travel, right? Like whatever that means. I really love going to small events, and I think that especially these days where so many things are based on analytics, everything's about like how many people showed up. Like I love going to the types of things where like it's so intimate that it's sort of like, okay, we're all being here for each other, and so I think that's what I would go to. It would be probably something along the lines of like like a show with local musicians, or like an open mic. I think those are the kinds of things I miss, especially because like, I mean, I've thrown a Zoom open mic, and I'll say that like I'm not a fan of Zoom open mics. Like, I know we got to do them. So if you're organizing one, like no shade, I'm organizing one too. It's just like there's so much about the energy of being with people in person when the spirit is emitting from someone's tongue, or like from someone's hands. Like it's a very tactile experience that just cannot be recreated online, and that's I think what I really appreciate it, because I feel like it's sort of like when no one feels like they have to be on, what I'm saying? Maybe aside from the person on stage, but everyone's just kind of chilling, and I feel like Zoom is a very difficult place unless you've got your camera off. If you've got your camera on, it's very difficult to not also be on, which is why oftentimes after a long day of Zooms, you feel like you've just like done a bunch of meetings all throughout the city. And I'm sorry, the other question was like, what's the next city? The next city is Los Angeles, yo. Like, this is what I was supposed to move out here to, like California. My relationship with California this past decade, ever since I left in 2009, has been interesting because, like I have a number of, most of my friends from the Bay have left. And that's one of the reasons I moved to LA instead, was because most of them moved down here, if not New York. But also because Lovely's family is out here in LA and my family's in the Bay. Like my experience in California is basically like airport to parents' house, eat their food, sleep on the couch, right? And then and especially when I was living in the East Coast, it was like that time with the family is so precious and you only got a few days. It is really hard to like figure out when's the right time to dip out. Who do I visit if I dip out for a night, you know, all of that. And so that's kind of what LA has been like. I know LA from a very, you know, like specific kind of vantage point. But one of the things I was actually really excited about was because of that relationship with LA, I actually haven't really been to a lot of museums or galleries. But another reason why I really love somewhere like LA and in California is because unlike somewhere like DC, for example, people really look in many different places to find art, you know, like, and so much amazing art exists in DC outside of museums, but the museums are so big that, you know, like, it's just like you get to DC and you're looking for art, and then, you know, like National Gallery's like, I'm here, you know, Smithsonian's like, I'm here, you know, and then so like it's hard to like find, you know, like the block parties and the poetry slams and, you know, like you know, the stuff that made me love art. So I really want to dig into LA, especially because it's so diverse. Like, you know, like I'm living on the West Side, which makes most people who are not on the West Side kind of be like, you know, and so I want to understand why, you know, I mean, I kind of understand why because I live on Venice, but like, I want to understand more, you know, so yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that those are all the questions. I know you have one more final reading that you want to do. And then I think I'm just going to say thank you, everybody, for attending and everybody watching on YouTube and Facebook. It's been really great working with you, Adriel, to put this presentation together and to learn more about your practice. I really admire the Culture Lab, so it's exciting to introduce Houston in this quasi way. And also too, to work with Bridget and the Asian Society of Texas. So Bridget, I don't know if you want to have any closing remarks, but I'll leave it to Adriel and then he'll close us out.
Okay, yeah, I just want to second the thanks, Adriel, for all of the time and that laser-like insight you've been sharing with us. It's been a real treat, and so happy that DiverseWorks organized this discourse and all of the studio visits. And I think we need to have food be a feature of when you first come and visit in person. And as a longtime resident of LA, and because you In and Out appeared earlier, I'm going to represent the people in the chat and say we're taking you to Whataburger when you get here. Thanks again.
So yeah. Thank you. First of all, I really appreciate just the hospitality of everyone hosting this Zoom, and also so many of the people on the chats. You know, like whether or not you're one of the artists that I visited, I'm about to visit. You know, it's just been a really beautiful experience, and in so many unexpected ways, it's really helped alleviate how much I miss traveling. So I appreciate everybody present on this, you know, folks in the balconies. What's up, Facebook? What's up, YouTube? So yeah, I'll read this last one, and then we'll go from there. If you would like to continue to follow my work, I have a website at drizzle.com. I know that a lot of the artists have looked at it because they tell me, and then I'm kind of embarrassed because I actually haven't updated it in like over a year. Like it's been on my to-do list ever since the beginning of the pandemic. But you know, aside from like some of the projects I showed you, like Elevator Pitch into Finga, like a lot of the other projects that I've worked on are here. And then I'm kind of on the gram, DRZZL. I've been you know, trying to strike a balance. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to decrease my real people socializing, I shouldn't fill it in with social media socializing. So I've been just kind of, you know, scaling down on a bit of both. But I do post on there every once in a while. All right, word. And yeah, I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. I'll read this last one. It's just a couple of minutes. Thanks for sticking with me. Yeah. Chapter 4, the gulf between us. Oh wait, is it helpful for me to screen share? I'll screen share it. Oh, whoa, I almost clicked the leave button, see? We know it's almost time. All right, share. Okay, the gulf between us. I wonder what would have happened if I just said, fuck it, and came to Houston anyway. It would have been a 30-hour drive, which equates to like 4 bathroom breaks if I didn't drink any water for a day. Doable. But when I got there, would I be experiencing the kind of Houston that Houstonians know? The traffic maps on the Beltway look eerily green. People have been describing the weather lately as kind of nice. Getting a bowl of pho to go just seems unethical. If I came to Houston, how many times would someone say, it isn't usually like this? Or, if you had come here last year, it would have been different. Or, next time you come, it'll be the same again. How often would they refer to a memory from a different time when Houston was a different Houston, a Houston that I wasn't there for? And what if I came to Houston in the middle of a pandemic and a month before a crazy election and everything was just as it always is? Would that be normal or strange? Coming from California, I'm used to going to places and people telling me that I brought the nice weather. I see it as a way to prep me for more things that might be unseasonable, that sometimes even the most cliche traits of a city need a break from the tourists. It seems like this has been a year for breaks, no matter where you are. Maybe right now, Houston to most Houstonians looks just like New York to New Yorkers or California to Californians. Just ceilings, furniture, light switches, and a shit ton of Zooms. But one thing I have learned about Houston is that it has a deep relationship with change. It has bred legends, seen them rise and seen them fall, or at least move away. Houston is a place so vast that it can hide in plain sight, seem to move in slow motion until suddenly you realize that everything around you has transformed unnoticed. And sometimes that change can be quick. Houston can be a safe haven one day and have the ground swept up from under it the next. Houston knows change, deep, transformative change, better than most. The change we're in right now, it's that kind of change. Look at me. I'm done. It's that kind of change. A kind of change that I don't think I really understood, no matter how often I traveled, no matter how good I got at adjusting my body clock and learning foreign phrases to get by in new countries. One thing I took away from everyone I spoke to is that Houston is a place where you know that you never know. And that's a lesson that I think will stay with me wherever life takes me. All right, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you so much for the time you spent. For those of you who have or will take time with me on Zoom as well, it's a lot of hours to like sit through somebody talking, kind of like emoting on Zoom, and then like and then talking to me, in person. But it's been really a beautiful experience. I appreciate you all. I can't wait to get out to Houston for real. I'm also thinking about continuing to write as I have these conversations with more artists, and then figuring out some way to sort of, represent this back to the city in a way that could benefit the community. So I'm still thinking about that, but suggestions, I'm open. I'll talk to Ashley and Bridget and other friends about it. And yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Have a good night.